What's up, guys? Welcome to What's Up Wednesday. This is going to be a new series that I'm going to be doing here on the channel. I'm going to do a weekly rundown of some of the biggest news and what I'm watching from the week. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first story, and the biggest one in my opinion, is the US and Iran conflict, which has been ongoing for about 3 weeks. It's had a pretty immediate impact with oil prices and gas prices going up, and flights and tourism were disrupted, and the markets were all volatile. But beyond that, Iran also closed the Strait of Hormuz, which is a major oil route in the region. Iran also attacked energy facilities and disrupted the global supply of oil. And in some places in the US, we've seen oil prices go up as much as 90 cents a gallon within like a month. So a lot of very tangible effects that we're seeing here, even back on American soil. And Trump is very critical of other countries for not helping in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran has also said that neutral ships can pass safely, but they specifically are barring vessels belonging to the US or Israel or any allies that are aiding in the war. Israel also struck South Par's gas field. Trump is saying that he had no idea about any of this and that the US was not involved, but he also went on to say that there would be major, massive retaliation if Iran were to attack Qatar in any sort of retaliation against this. And while all of this is going on, Ukraine and Russia are still at war. Israel and Palestine are still at war. And this is actually one of the first times that Iran actually struck and killed Palestinians. They struck the West Bank and 3 Palestinians are dead. So a lot of developments in the war. And back home, it's getting a lot of criticism from Democrats. A lot of Democrats are saying that, Trump didn't get any congressional approval for these strikes. And they proposed a war powers limitation bill and the Republicans blocked it. A lot of them were claiming that Trump doesn't need congressional approval. And even so, everything is completely legal. Democrats disagree, call it a legal war. And all of this is while the Pentagon is requesting over $200 billion to support their efforts in the war in Iran. So yeah, there's a lot going on in the US, overseas, in the Middle East, and there's no real clear resolution to any of this. It kind of just feels like a stalemate. Another interesting tidbit that I learned is that diesel hit $5 again, and this is only the second time in history that this has happened. The first time was in 2022 when Ukraine was originally invaded. So it's all kind of coming full circle, but this is definitely something that I'm keeping my eye on and something that I'm watching. Something else that I found interesting is a story about Kalshi. So Kalshi is obviously that quote unquote prediction market that everyone's quote unquote gambling allegedly on what the weather will be like, how many times Trump will pick his nose during the State of the Union, and all sorts of things. And in Arizona, the Attorney General Chris Mays filed criminal charges against Kalshi, claiming that the platform is allowing betting on sports and elections and political events. And she's pretty much claiming that you're not able to do this and they're running it illegally with no regulatory approval. She also says that gambling on elections is illegal in Arizona. Kalshi obviously responded, calling the criminal charges seriously flawed and meritless, and said that they're going to fight the case. And the CEO of Kalshi called the charges a quote total overstep. So they're pretty upset about all of this. But it seems like the Attorney General in Arizona is also very upset because she filed charges against them. Now, important to note, no executives from Kalshi are named as defendants in the charging documents. But these misdemeanor convictions in the state could include asset forfeiture and the possibility of jail time. So even though they're not named as defendants, they still could face jail time. Personally, I don't think anything's going to come out of this, but I think it's the first step of the government being aware of this so-called loophole in sports gambling that I guess is legal in 50 states. I mean, I'm not sure if it's actually legal because obviously charges were filed, so I guess we'll have to wait and see. But for now, Kalshi is still operating and staying up. Something else that I've been watching and learning more about is the allegations about César Chávez. César Chávez was allegedly inappropriate with minors during the time that he was politically active, and this has led to a lot of cities canceling their César Chávez days and celebrations of his life, and a lot of people are pretty angry. But there's also a different crowd of people who are saying, well, why are we just hearing about this? This dude's been dead for decades, and now we're hearing about him allegedly being inappropriate with children. And it's pretty reminiscent, in my opinion, of the Michael Jackson stuff, that documentary coming out and detailing alleged instances of him being inappropriate with children. And again, raising a lot of similar questions of why are we just now hearing about this? So yeah, something else that I'm keeping my eye on. And also following the firing of Kristi Noem, who is the DHS Secretary, Department of Homeland Security. She's pretty much the lady that runs ICE and is in charge of the border and everything. Not the border czar, that's Tom Homan, but she was fired after a lot of people were calling for her impeachment and her resignation after the deaths of Alex Preddy and Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis. But anyways, she was since replaced by this guy, Mark Wayne Mullen from Oklahoma, and he's a former senator, and he was in front of the Senate actually today, making his case that he would be a steady hand for a department that, to be honest, was roiled by controversy under Kristi Noem. He said verbatim that his goal in 6 months is that we're not the lead story every single day. You know, it felt like week after week, day after day, hour after hour, we're hearing something about ICE, something about protests, something about Kristi Noem. And I guess he's trying to mitigate that and work in the shadows like Batman, I guess. I don't know. He also retracted some statements that he made about Alex Preddy, who was killed by federal officers. I guess he called him deranged, and he's taking that back. So a lot of changes that I think a lot of people will welcome. I think this is a pretty bipartisan thing. I'm not sure if Kristi Noem was that popular with either side, to be honest. She definitely wasn't popular with liberals, but I don't think she was terribly popular with conservatives either. I mean, I'm sure they didn't want ICE being in the news every single day and having to hear about it from their liberal coworkers, you know? Something else that I actually thought was kind of goofy, but also a positive story, in my opinion. The dude who's saying, because I got high, Afroman, he won a jury verdict clearing him of any wrongdoing after he released a music video that mocked 7 Ohio police officers after they failed a raid on his home, I guess. They were claiming that he defamed them. You know, he harshly criticized the guns that were drawn on him during the raid in his property in 2022. And this is honestly a pretty great freedom of speech decision. His main argument was that he had the right to mock these officers, particularly after they smashed down his door, ultimately for no reason at all. He said, quote, "All of this is their fault and they have the audacity to sue me." Anyways, there were only a few hours of deliberation for the jury, so they came to a decision pretty quickly, finding in favor of Afroman, because to be honest, he didn't really do anything wrong. I mean, obviously he was cleared, but you know, he could have faced $3.9 million in damages if he had lost. And I think one of the funniest things about this entire case is when Afroman's lawyer was asking a deputy if his wife was cheating on him in the courtroom. So yeah, all around a pretty goofy case, but big ups to Afroman. Big W on What's Up Wednesday for him not having to pay almost $4 million in damages. All right, I'm going to end on something a little fun. I'm sure a lot of people are aware that March Madness is starting. There was a first four game that just finished. Miami won, so big ups to Miami. They've had a pretty fun season to watch. And the round of 64 begins tomorrow when Ohio State takes on TCU. Personally, I'm pulling for TCU. Not a fan of the Buckeyes in the slightest. I'm going to share my final four with you real quick. I've got Michigan, Duke, Wisconsin, and Nebraska. I think this will be a great tournament this year. There's a lot of fun storylines, a lot of seniors who haven't won any March Madness games yet who are playing in this tournament and are going to be playing their behind off. So should be a lot of fun to watch. I'm really excited. And let's go blue. So anyways, that's the rundown for this week. The main thing I'm going to be watching is definitely the situation in the Middle East and how it impacts the economy with oil prices and gas prices. Stocks, I'm obviously going to be watching my mutual fund, and I'm going to be watching my Roth IRA. I'm going to be watching all of my stocks to see what the changes will be in this war. I mean, it's a very volatile time financially, so should be pretty interesting to keep up with. But let me know what you think. What stories are you keeping an eye on? And I'll catch you next week on What's Up Wednesday.